Hello, everybody. We are back after a brief hiatus because of reasons. This is Back to Basics, continuing on our long-standing tradition of generally ranting and getting slightly pissy about the Bible. I am, as always, Pastor Don, and I'm here to provide you with your daily dose, or in this case, weekly dose, of theological snark and general absurdity. And joining me is my absurdity amplifier, Courtney.
Hello.
So
For those of
we,
you chiming in just into Exodus for some reason, yeah, welcome. But
yeah,
check check out the prequel as well.
right. Right. After years of work, we finally got through the book of Genesis because, unlike some colleagues of ours that are also doing a very similar thing, we're not skipping anything. We're just going slog by slog through the whole thing. We're not glossing through anything. We're going to hit all of the greatest hits, and we're going to hit all of those B-side backtracks that nobody bothers with from the pulpit. And we're going to talk about why they're important, or in some cases, why they're not. Now, for those of you who are big fans of our series here, please identify yourself so we know you exist. Also, you may remember that we did a big live stream to celebrate our arrival into Exodus, which will be the first thing on the playlist for Exodus. And in that, we covered Exodus chapter 1, which was basically just our introduction to the book of Exodus and kind of how we got genealogically to where we are. And I I imagine many of you were thinking, okay, now we got to slog through a whole bunch of random crap before we get to the meat and potatoes of the Exodus story. Well, no, we're starting right away with Moses in chapter 2, because that's
It
what
dives
this
right
book is
in.
about.
A direct sequel.
Yes, this is the big budget sequel to the book of Genesis, and oh, they go hard from the beginning. So, that being the case, shall I leave it to you, dear Courtney, to do our reading for the day?
Oh, I guess so. If you guys don't mind the nasally, got a bit of a congestion thing going on. It's springtime in Michigan, finally. Welcome to
Yeah.
your allergies. They've been
Springtime in
waiting.
Japan, too, and it hurts just as much.
Yeah, I buy it. All right. Now, a man from the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. She con- the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine baby, she hid him 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and plastered it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds on the bank of the river. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her attendants walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her maid to bring it. When she opened it, she saw the child. He was crying, and she took pity on him. This must be one of the Hebrews' children, she said. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and get you a nurse from the Hebrew woman to nurse the child for you? Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Yes. So the girl went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will give you your wages. So the woman took the child and nursed it. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses because she said, I drew him out of the water. Do we want to stop and I feel like the sections on these are pretty dense, so I think it might be wise to stop and talk
Yeah,
about this part.
we can go ahead and pause here. I'm just looking at Alter's notes as we go through because hey, guess what? Alter didn't stop with the book of Genesis. And yeah, there's
No, no, I've been eyeballing that absolute like forget door stopper. That's like a ship anchor of of a
well,
book.
I'll be honest with you. The first page of chapter 2 of Exodus here, this guy puts Karl Barth to shame with the amount of footnotes that are on this page. You got like about like an inch and a half of text and then like about 3 feet of footnotes on this on these first 2 pages.
Yikes.
So yeah, I think we got a bit to talk about. We can pause here and get on to the second one a little bit later.
All right,
So
I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start from the top. Then, when she saw that he was a fine baby, that's a really weird set of phrasing. Can you please elucidate that?
so this is, let's see, verse 2. Uh honestly, there's not much being said here in Alter about that particular verse, so I'm gonna bring up the Hebrew here, which is already messing with my on-screen share. So those of you guys who are watching that, enjoy. So I'll just slide that back over there, and then I'll open a separate window so that I don't have that problem. Problem solved. Okay. All right. So we're looking at DUS Exodus 2. Let's go right to the Hebrew and see what it says here. The woman conceived and bore a son, and she saw. Ooh, this is godly child there. Tov
Godly
is the
child is a great deal more specific than fine baby.
uh good, pleasant, agreeable, good, better, glad, good, good thing in the masculine because bounty, like, yeah, I don't know why the hell KJV translates that as godly. Like, it's good in the same sense of, let me double check this. I'm pretty sure that's the same adjective. Yeah, Genesis 1:4. Good. Tov. Yeah, it's the same one that God used to describe creation in the beginning. It's the same type of good that we're seeing here.
Okay, just general
Yeah.
overall good.
Yeah. So that's a fine baby. It's probably not what they're getting at with this. It's probably
It's just it's such weird phrasing. Like as I was reading it, I'm like, literally, I'm not even inferring anything. Literally, what does that mean? That
what you
yeah,
mean. You
so
mean to tell me that English speakers trying to translate weird interpretations of a thousands-year-old Hebrew text aren't going to always have the best phrasing?
hey, but this is the NRSVUE. Like
Yeah.
it usually has better phrasing than a fine baby.
I'm not saying it's perfect. And if we look at altars too,
A terrible translation.
well, altars is a good translation. Let's use that. And a man from the house of
All right,
Levi went and took a Levite daughter, and the woman conceived and bore a son. And she saw that he was goodly, and she hid him 3 months. Like, so
goodly.
that, yeah, goodly, which, as an adverbative, I guess, it's kind of a combination adverb adjective that we do sometimes in English because it's a garbage language. Like,
Really.
I'm sorry, I don't like my language. Anyway, goodly in
One
that
man's
case.
trash is another man's treasure. I find English to be fascinating, and I really enjoy speaking it.
In fairness, English is my primary bread and butter. It's not just my native language. I use it for preaching. I use it for poetry. I use it for like I get the beauty of the English language. I also recognize that it is structurally and grammatically a big old dumpster fire.
Yeah, I
So
relate to it. I like it in that way.
yeah,
I'm
it
also
me.
I'm also cobbled together from weird shit I've picked up along the way and smashed together like a kid who doesn't understand Legos.
I thought you were gonna go with a kid who doesn't understand Barbie dolls, and I think Legos works better there. Well done. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, goodly is a weird adjective to use. So there isn't really a good one because what we're dealing with here is the sense of good that like God saw when looking over creation. So they had a baby, like, wow, that's a good baby. Baby is good. Like baby. Awesome baby. Top notch baby. 10 out of 10 is good boy. And that's pretty much what's happening here. Like everybody looks at their kids that way. Like
And she saw that he was a heckin' good baby.
exact. That's a translation I could get behind. As she saw, it was a heckin' good baby. Yes, accurate.
Like mimetic translations and stuff are so goofy, but like in common modern vernacular, I feel like that gets the point
Well, the
across.
thing about it is like
Fine, fine, heckin' good. Okay.
if you really want to get into the linguistic weeds about it, the meme ish of it was developed usually for pictures of dogs and other cute things and babies and whatnot. So like the phrase heckin' good is connected to a sense of almost parental joy in that which we have custodianship over, which is way the hell more accurate to good as it's being used here than any like straight normal boring English word we have. So
You
there's
know,
actually a
I can really relate to that. The very idea of, going through pregnancy and bearing a child. And there's an order that if they've got a ding dong, you gotta pitch them in the Nile. Like, and immediately it becomes apparent, oh, this is a unicorn baby. which is what I've heard in doctors' offices, babies who are just way too easy to deal with are referred to as,
Hmm.
he sleeps all night, every night.
Yeah, my
Never gives
middle
me
son
any
was like
trouble.
that.
Huh?
Yeah, my middle son was like that. He slept
Was
all
he?
through the night, every night. He was totally a cool kid in that way.
This is a really good baby. I don't want to give this up.
Right?
This is an easy baby.
Now, for the sake of the larger narrative, too, it's also worth noting here that we're existing in between two very important bits of historical parallel, a bit of foreshadowing and a bit of historical reference here. The foreshadowing, of course, a savior has come to the people of God, and the king knows that this might be a thing, so orders all of the infants in the area killed. Seem
Uh-huh.
familiar? Yeah, like this is
Yeah.
Herod's going to be taking his cues from this guy later down the road. Watch out for further live stream announcements in the near future in which we may discuss this.
Somebody drop in a quick clip of George Lucas saying it rhymes.
Yeah, I mean, like say what you will, George Lucas was not wrong about that particular narrative fact. Like the mythology, history, theology works because it rhymes in that way, and so we've got that. But also, and I'm going to take this right out of Alter on verse
Well,
3.
yeah, history itself has a horrible tendency of doing that too. So,
In the good and the bad. Now, again, I'm going to take this right out of Alter's verse 3, his commentary in verse 3 here, where he says, the basket in which the infant is placed is called a teva, which is ark, the same word used for Noah's ark. As numerous commentators have observed, the story of Moses begins with a very pointed allusion to the flood story. So that's something that's missed entirely in the translation to Hebrew, is that Moses is being placed in an ark here. He is being preserved through a flood that is drowning the infants here. So this is a forward and backward reference happening at the same time. So
we're
structurally,
missing the mimetic importance of what a papyrus basket plastered with bitumen and pitch is and what that means.
yeah, like it would honestly be and this is a debate in biblical translation, is do you stick as close to the literal letter of the word, in which case it's you'd have to be that specific, or do you stick as close to the meaning, in which case it would make way more sense to say when she could no longer hide him, she got an ark for him and coded it and put the kid in it and put it on the reeds. Like that would make more sense in conveying the narrative in English, but it would require a departure from the literal accuracy of the text. As you can
Isn't that what
see,
footnotes are for?
right? But this is a huge debate in biblical translation: is how much is footnotes and how much stays to the text. Because let's not forget that for us, even as progressive Christians, this is still a sacred thing. This text, and
Yeah.
notwithstanding our own take on this in sacredness, I don't want to make major alterations to the translation of the Torah and then try to explain that to all my Jewish siblings just because I was doing it for Christian purposes. Like, there's
No.
multiple layers to why that's complicated.
But also, like, Jewish people regard a translation of the Torah as just that, a translation of the Torah.
Yeah,
It's not the actual Torah.
right. And
Am
like,
I incorrect in that?
I I know that's true of Muslims. I think that's reasonably true of the Jewish as well, but I think that varies from community to community, and I don't want to speak broadly for a community I'm not a part
Oh,
of.
I thought it was a general thing. I
Yeah, I know
apologize.
it's. I know from my experience with Muslims, it's pretty universal for them. I can't speak for the Jewish community. There's fewer of them out here, and there's fewer I've had opportunity to interact with theologically. Although, if you are part of the Jewish community in Japan and wish to change that, I would love to have conversations with you. Excuse me. So, in any case, what we have here
You're
is
a part of the
this.
Jewish community and would like to be part of our conversations at all, please, 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 please.
Yes,
We're not going to try and tell you you're wrong about shit. We want to listen. We want to
that's
freaking learn about your holy book that means so much to us.
yes, and that's like this is a really important part that we can't help but stick with is the fact that like our holy book is our holy book, but we share it. And, to be part of the conversation, be part of our community, you don't have to follow our take on it, but you can still be in fellowship with us. Like, we still love you, even if your take on the religion is different than ours. Like you may be our long lost cousins or vice versa, but we like having a good relationship with folk. Anyway, so we talked about
Sorry,
our
I'm sitting here
fine baby.
trying to cross check my comment about the anyway, well, I have to put a something on the screen or whatever to say whether I was, correct or not about that because I feel bad about that if I was wrong. I apologize.
Uh, it's understandable, I think, for all of us. We don't know everything about everything. So we've talked about our fine baby, and we've talked about the kind of literary referencing. So any more about this fine baby in his early days?
Um, his sister was right on top of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I remember thinking that as a kid, just being like, "Whoa, way to
Let's
go!"
his sister stood at a distance to see what happened to him. Yeah, like she's just keeping an eye out.
Yeah, and then when an opportunity presents itself, she's like, "Oh, shall I go and get you a Hebrew wet nurse?" Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and goes and gets the kid's mom.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, awesome.
She's
Goes and
ready to
gets her
do the
mom.
work.
Like, holy cow! Talk about thinking on the fly.
Right? Like,
Hey, you'll want a Hebrew for a wet nurse for this Hebrew baby, right?
mhm.
Let's let's go get one.
Yeah.
I bet I can find one. After all, we've been making them pitch their children in the river.
Yeah, and you know, it's worth noting that like there's some cultural references in here. Like in verse 10 we get the child grew up. She brought him to Pharaoh's daughter and he became her son. Like this is just really he reaches the age of weaning, so he's old enough to not be sucking at tits anymore. That's pretty much it. It's not like he's a full-blown man and then she declared him a son. No, he's just old enough not to need a wet nurse anymore. And so the mama got a couple of years, and they say at that time it would have been around 3, which is a bit different from how we do it today. So
Speak
yeah,
for
it is what it is.
yourself. I breastfed my kid for 2 years and 9 months.
Wow. Yeah, we generally weaned around 1 for us, but to each their own. You couldn't by the time they were 1, I couldn't keep my kids' hands away from food. Like they were just like, no, I want the steak. Give me the steak. Also, I have heard of these French fry things. I wish to eat them all. So yeah, couldn't do much
And my
there.
kid definitely wanted both.
So it's also worth discussing the name Moses. She named him Moses because she said, "I drew him out of the water." Now, this is something that comes up a lot in our readings of the Old Testament. Is we get someone, this is their name because this, and every one of us who's ever read that in English is like, the hell? Like, okay, what do the two have to do with each other?
I assumed it had something to do with what it means in the original language.
You are not incorrect about that. I'm going back to
That
Alton
one
here.
I think seems rather obvious. That seems like a simple connecting
You
point
would
A to
you would
point B.
think, but believe it or not, a lot of people do miss that. Like Moses because I
Huh?
drew him out of the water. Well, okay, like I guess the name came to you in a moment. Like particular people coming out of evangelical backgrounds would read that and think, "Oh, it must have just been the name that God dropped on her heart when she drew him out of the water, and that's what happened." Like, no, there's a lot of linguistic referencing going on here that doesn't really carry over. It's not really like that. So we've got Moses. This is an authentic Egyptian name that means the one who is born, therefore son. Folk etymology connects that to masha, which is to draw out from water. Um, and it also connects to the active form of the verb moshe, which is he who draws out. And it creates this very interesting multi-layered linguistic parallel where you've got a name that means something in Egyptian, but also connects to a Hebrew word that means, depending on how you use it, the one who is drawn out from water, or the one who does the drawing out, depending on whether you do it in the active or the passive. So we have here a name that identifies him as Egyptian, names his really Zoom. It identifies him as Egyptian. It names his origin from the water, but also hints at his future in drawing the people out from Egypt. And it does this all in one name. And so there's so many layers to that we just can't get in the English. And I really think it's worth us knowing that.
Oh, it's like a Tolkien name. It
Right?
means this in this language and that in that language.
Yeah. And like the biblical characters, we've encountered this a couple of times, but biblical characters love the play on words, particularly when it comes to names. And we're going to see this again and again and again. But it means something here, it means something there, and they all kind of connect in a way that totally isn't indicative of the fact that this text has been edited a million times over several thousand years. But yeah, so that's where we are with that. So anything more about our first chunk, or do we want to move on?
No, I think we're ready to move along.
So those of you who are familiar with our show may recognize that by suddenly fading to a different part of the clip, we're going to indicate that we're cutting this off halfway through because, as is our usual way, we wound up talking way too damn long. So we are going to stop here for this week, and we will catch you on the next episode. The usual rules apply. If you want to join more in the conversation, the Discord server is there for that reason. We have worship coming most every week, either English or Japanese, as you prefer. And that's it. So have a good week. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.
Like, share, and subscribe.
Yes, do
Bye.
that thing. Bye.